Hello and welcome to North Country Matters. My name is Donna Seymour. I'm a member of the St. Lawrence County branch of the American Association of University Women, one of the civic partners for this show. Today we have Julie Vaisey with us. Julie is the director of the Neighborhood Center for Colton, Parishville, and Pierrepont. So we're going to be talking about your three towns. Let's remind people, before we go too far, that the Neighborhood Center is part of the CDP, and the CDP is actually the Community Development Program of St. Lawrence County, which is a private, not-for-profit agency that serves the county, and it's one of 56 agencies in a network across New York State, and one of 1,000 community action agencies in the United States. CDP was incorporated in 1965 and operates programs and services for low-income families to assist them towards self-sufficiency. So let's start off, Julie, by having you tell folks a little about yourself and how you came to be doing this work for the Neighborhood Center.
Well, at an age I decided to go back to school, and I was using some of my own center's programs, and once you use these programs you find out how necessary they are, and you get to see the workers. And at one point the job opening came available and I applied, and I was fortunate enough to get it. And from there we've just been trying to expand it. We are a very huge geographical area, if you think about Colton and Pierrepont and Parishville, and it's very rural. And so we've just been trying to reach out and individualize towards our own demographics.
Well, and the town of Colton is the largest town in St. Lawrence County, which is the largest county in New York State. Right. So when we're talking about geography, we're talking about a lot of land area, yes, and very few people compared to the amount of acreage that each one of those towns has.
Exactly.
So let's talk a little bit about what some of the services are that you offer folks through your neighborhood center. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things that the parts of the CDP program that you actually can oversee and administer for your communities.
Okay, first, our center is unique to all the other neighborhood centers under CDP because I actually have 3 food pantries. Because of the huge geographical, Parishville, Pierrepont, and Colton all have a pantry. And anyone who's registered can go to any one of those three sites to use the benefits there. So we also offer classes for nutrition and emergency preparedness and budgeting and other self-sufficiency things, how to lower your electrical bill. And so we kind of partner with other agencies to come in, like Cooperative Extension, to just educate. But we also, if you have a crisis, if you're in a crisis and if you cannot make your light bill or
or you've run out of fuel or something like that,
or anything like that, yes, you can come in, and if we have the funds, we're more than willing to help with people.
Now, you mentioned emergency preparedness, and I was just reading that Colton is going to be putting on an emergency preparedness workshop. Or did you just do that, or is it coming up?
The Methodist Church just had one.
Okay.
And we're just doing a program right now with emergency preparedness for the seniors and disabled people. We put together backpacks sort of based on what the Red Cross is saying you would need an emergency backpack, so you can grab it and go, whether it's a microburst, an ice storm, or even if you just fell on the ice, because the Methodist Church in Colton put together a 3-ring binder, and in it is all this paper that you can fill out with your contact, your medications. So if your cell phone is dead or you couldn't grab it, you know what your phone numbers.
Yeah,
because not many people have memorized them.
No, and it's gotten harder now that we all have to have the extra 3 digits on the front of all our numbers. So unless you're calling 315, and so many times we're calling somewhere else.
Right.
And with spring almost around the corner, we hope, certainly something that you've had problems with in your 3 townships before is spring flooding.
Yes.
So people might actually have to leave their home very, very quickly. So having a grab-and-go bag with all of that kind of information is really critical, isn't it?
Yes, and there's things like solar blankets and whistles and just things that if you need it to do it. And the Red Cross has gave us a link, so when the people come for their backpacks, they can watch this short video on how to individualize, you know, their backpack.
With extra medication or
Right.
something like
or
that for
food,
themselves.
or even
right.
pet information,
Right.
because your pet, if you don't have the rabies shots with you, you're kind of out of luck, and no one wants to leave.
Now, another thing that I think your neighborhood and a lot of neighborhood centers offer, and it's something that's really critical in our rural communities, is socialization, especially for older people, isn't it?
Yes, and we have actually numerous ways of doing it. Not only come to our classes and, you know, but volunteering at our centers. I have retired women and a couple of men who come help on load trucks, that they come in to, and they talk, you know, and they visit. And when you hold a class in Parishville in February and March, spring break fever will just bring people in.
Sure.
And then they get to socialize, and they get to talk about food, which everybody likes. So they, you know, budgeting is a little more personal, but you're still out there and you're meeting your neighbors and, you know, getting.
Right, because winters can be long in the North Country.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, there are home delivered meals in your area. That doesn't necessarily come under your program,
Right.
but you can make sure. I'm sure you're aware of who's getting that and who needs that
Right.
service, and that's a great way to check in on
And we make
folks
the
who may
connection.
be homebound.
Yes, and we make the connection between, like, if Meals on Wheels, if someone's like, oh, you know, I don't have a car, I don't have a vehicle, I have very limited, you know, food stamps or resources, we know how to connect them. And actually, not my agency, but Meals on Wheels just began distributing meals in Parishville, and we did help collect names.
Okay,
and
good.
let the public know that that was a resource that was coming in.
Good. So one of the things that we know, I've had Andrea Montgomery from the Office of the Aging on the program a couple of times, and we've talked a lot about the senior population in the county. And, you know, it ranges between 20 and 25% of St. Lawrence County are folks who are 60 or older. Plus, in your 3 townships, you have 2 school districts.
More than
Two, well, yeah,
Several,
in terms of,
Right.
but it's Colton, Pierrepont, and Parishville Hopkins, so are the 2 main school districts.
Yes.
That, of course, you probably also touched a little bit about Clifton Fine,
And,
or not?
and Herman,
And okay.
Canton, and Potsdam, and just
Yeah,
about
just about. Now,
anybody.
wherever people live on those
Yes.
school district
Yes.
borders. So, talk to us a little bit about who your client base is, and have you seen it change over time in terms of more people coming in for certain kinds of help maybe than didn't a few years ago?
Yes. Our center's every center has sort of a kind of individual type of clientele. Ours tends to be disabled and senior people, or the working poor. People who have lived in the area, their parents lived in the area.
They're
You know,
long-time generation members of the community.
And with the changes in benefits and what is being offered, I have seen an increase of retired people and the working poor. I don't have very many people who are actually receiving public benefits, but people who have retired and now they find that their income is not going to support them, and they haven't ever used like SNAP or Medicaid.
Right.
They're always right above it enough, so they don't
But
know.
their circumstances have changed,
Right.
and so they don't really know how to access these
Navigate,
programs.
or
Yeah.
even to a certain extent, like their rights to,
Mhm,
you know, or
right.
who to call, or the paperwork alone is very intimidating. So people bring in forms, and, you know, we sit down and help them.
Mhm.
You know, we discuss if they're not ready to sit down at home and, you know, oh, we could volunteer here, or you could volunteer for us, but maybe the hospital, or possibly, you know, Meals on Wheels. There's a lot of resources out there that once you retire, if you want to stay busy, that you can do. So we try to be an information area to know what's going on in our community, so we can individualize.
So you can help people who need help, and you can also find helpers
Yes.
to be
Yes.
who have the time and the resources maybe to give.
Yeah.
And so that's actually a very important part, and that's both sides of keeping a community together and active, isn't it?
Yes.
Because it's developing that sense of who's here, who needs help, who can give help, and how do we all figure out how we can all get along better.
And it's also an issue of self-esteem. I mean, a lot of my new clients are like, well, I'm using this, and they do it does make you feel less. And when you can say, well, but you can offer here,
Right.
their self-esteem and their self-worth goes up. So even if they're using programs, they are a worthwhile contributor to the
Right.
community. And I think that's a huge benefit for when neighborhood centers can connect people and make them go out and feel, better about themselves.
Right, because you're, in the end, it all balances out.
Yes.
You've used a program, but you've given back on this side,
Yeah.
and so it all balances out in the
Yes,
end, and I think
exactly.
it does make people feel better. Julie, let's talk a little bit about what some of the barriers are that you face and the folks who live in your communities face. We just had Steve Todd in here from the Jefferson Lewis Bosse's, and he's working on a poverty reduction program in the city of Watertown, and one of their key areas that they've been working on is transportation, which is, it's always been a huge barrier in the North Country. So, and probably more so in some of the towns that you work in just because of their size.
Yes. Going past roads and everything, a lot of people just cannot afford to have their own car, their own vehicle. They get to this point in their life, and that's a big, even if it just breaks down, you don't have the resources to fix it. Or there's older people who never learned to drive, so they're there now that their spouse, who are their people they're dependent on, and
Or maybe they shouldn't be driving anymore
Right, or
because
should be.
they've got some health problems.
I would never say that.
No. But we all know that
Yeah,
happens
and it
as
does happen.
people age. They
Yes.
become less safe
yes.
sometimes.
And then insurance and all becomes, and it affects every aspect of your life, whether it's from job searching, healthcare, shopping. In 2 of my townships, there is not a small store that takes food or SNAP benefits, and to have to travel 15 miles to spend your SNAP benefits, it's just a
It
hindrance.
makes it hard. It
That's
makes a
right.
bad situation harder,
That's
doesn't
right.
it?
Even like the free meal programs, they're so far away that it's not even a viable option for many people. And we're working hard to get a volunteer base who will deliver the food, and, give them a shopping list. We try to keep a regular standard food there, and then maybe even bring them to some of these classes so that they can socialize and maybe eat healthier, maybe not, or learn to use their what they do have more
Efficiently.
yeah, efficiently.
And one of the things that we know, as we have not yet come to the land of a long winter, is people feel a great sense of isolation. And when the weather's bad, it is much harder to get out, and you're more reluctant to do it. So that's got to be a big issue for a lot of folks in your community, especially the seniors who don't have the transportation or have more limited transportation. So it sounds like some of the programs that you do are trying to find ways to get either people to those folks or those folks to where your centers are.
Yes, and we can't walk like Canton
Right.
Center. Nobody's going to. Very few people can just walk to our centers. And then, if you're elderly or disabled, carrying the bags of food is also a hindrance.
That's a problem.
Things.
And one of the big problems that we have in the area, and it affects both ends of our generational spectrum, is the lack of child care and the lack of elder care.
Yes.
So that's going to be a big problem too in the towns that you serve, because there are folks who probably need a little respite from the home situation if they're caring for a spouse who's
Yes.
maybe disabled or
Yes.
elderly or has some health issues. So.
And anybody who's worked with healthcare also knows that it's very complicated, and there's always this subclause or and we're very lucky. The navigators for the health insurance companies will come in, and there's been many times I just picked up the phone and I said, this person has a question, or someone, when they deduct the Medicare, it's taking a chunk of their, and they don't realize that, there are resources that you can access to help. And
But not if you don't know that they're
right.
there.
And that's
so.
something, and since the navigate, and I would not even attempt to make a guess on most of them, but we're very lucky that the people who can come to our communities And even the SNAP, the health initiative had, so if we have questions or, you know, I'm just more of a,
you don't need to be the expert,
right, I'm
you're
not the expert, that's right, I
sure.
know perfect,
Sure.
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And so that also brings people out. And once you assist people, they become more comfortable coming in, and I think that breaks the isolation too, that they can come in and they feel like there's someone that they can talk to or go to, and they don't feel like they have to sit there worrying about it and not be able to find answers.
Well, you know, my husband just turned 65, so he just went on Medicare, and I don't care how well prepared you are for that. You just takes a while to learn how to navigate the system, and you have questions. We went over and spent some time with somebody in the county office of the aging who specializes in Medicare to find out what were the best way to make things happen wise. And so, you know, we're not afraid to fill out paperwork, but it's still, you want to make sure you fill it out correctly. So there's a lot to it. So it's good to hear that those programs have people that can come to communities like yours, because it's hard when you're faced with this very overwhelming task and you don't know where to start and you don't want to make a lot of mistakes.
Yes, and that's a lot of it. They don't, you know, they're competent. But when you get to that age, a lot of people tend to feel insecure or just diminished a little bit, and so they're reading something that they don't understand. And we talked about the election too.
Yes, right.
You know, sometimes it's just something new, and it's nice to have somewhere small. Agencies intimidate people, and it's just the nature of the beast, but to be able to go somewhere where you're comfortable, where you're getting your needs met.
With friendly faces who are not rushing you, and you don't feel like there's 6 people behind you all waiting, that you have the time to do that. You know, we had chatted when we first talked about doing the show, you had mentioned that some people in your townships were they were a little intimidated by the new voting machines that have been coming in the last few years, because it's a very different process than it used to be when we went into the booth, closed the curtains, and just, you know, flipped our little switches. And now you have to fill out a paper ballot and feed it into the machine. So those are all kinds of skills that people can learn, and neighborhood centers can help them do that, can't they? It doesn't matter what it is, that you can find a way to help. When you understand that there is a problem, you can develop a program to address it.
And I held an older man, I think he was in his 80s, and he's like, we didn't have bubble tests when I was in school. So he, you know, it wasn't anything that he could even draw on, you know. So we're hoping maybe we can have a class and have someone come in from the Board of Elections and just do a workshop and hopefully increase our voting base.
Right, because that's one thing that we have seen is that people, they need to vote, and they need to feel like they're participating in the system. And when they're afraid to go into the voting area because they don't quite understand how it works, that's something we can address. We can fix that, because you can do the kinds of things that you're talking about.
And that's one, not to interrupt you, but that is one of CDP's, is empowering and having people become self-sufficient and learning how to navigate and work things and stepping up one block, you know, kind of put ourselves out of work so people can do it on their own kind of thing. But it's nice to have a place where you can go in.
That's right, and a place where people are paying attention to what the needs in the community are and where some of the little deficits are, and saying, you know, we can fix that by doing this or by doing that. One of the things I wanted to talk about with you, Julie, is the townships that you are taking care of. There's no centralized services. There's no big food stores. People have to go shopping outside of those townships. I know you have some like medical clinics, but they still have to go to other places if they need any kind of comprehensive medical care. So those become barriers when you can't get something right in your own community, and you've got to figure out how you're going to get from here to there. And you're working on some volunteer transportation services. Are there other services that are like county-based that your folks can take advantage of?
Well, there's the Medicaid transportation, which goes back to the Medicare. People are like, well, I can't have this because I'm on Fidelis, or I'm on this because I have Medicaid, Medicare. And like I said, I am not the expert in the field, but we sit down and we help them make the phone call, because sometimes even making a phone call is intimidating.
Mm-hmm.
So that is one way we do assist. We sit there and we make the phone call. But we also have the forms, and when they're regular people, we have their invoice numbers and we can help them. Like, for example, we have an older person who for the first time had online checks.
Oh, yes.
They don't have a computer, they don't have any pay stubs, but if you're going to go to food stamps with your stubs, you have to access them online. They don't have it. And it was just a vicious circle, and they were ready to let their benefits go.
Mm-hmm.
So we
benefits that they needed.
Right, that they needed because
Right.
they live on very little. And so we sat down with them, and this is how you do the email. This is how this is how you access your accounts. This is we showed them, because that's something that I can do.
Right,
right. And and now they come in, and when they need their paychecks for something, we print them off for them. And I've had people sit down and look at civil service exams, and we printed off the forms and sat down with the form and say, well, this is your this is how you do your resume, and here's set up a one-stop career shop. It's not so much that we hold their hands as much as give them an initial push out of the nest sort of thing.
Right. But with a few feathers in their wings.
That's right. And a little bit of confidence, because a lot of times once they see you do it, they're like, oh, I can do that. And that's really what we work for.
Right. And that's something I've talked about with Andrea Montgomery before, is that they've started, the Office of the Aging is doing a lot more with computer access, computer training, because so many services that you want to take advantage of or access, you have to go through the internet now. You have to, and if you don't have those computer skills, the door is closed to you until you can figure out how to open it. Julie, what do you think are the most pressing issues in your community? That what do you see as the things that you need to work on and that you would like to be able to address to help the folks that you're seeing on an everyday basis?
So let's skip over transportation, right? Because
well, yes, exactly. We can't solve distance, unfortunately.
Right. And I would say home improvement.
Mm-hmm.
I have a high ratio of homeowners, and they did the dream. They worked, they paid off their house, they're retired. But now that house needs repairs, and they're paying for health care, they're paying for other things, and
we know
their
repairs
windows
are expensive.
That's right.
Yeah.
Even windows or insulation or basic safety things, like your driveway might be rutted and you're going to twist an ankle and break it, or your downstairs lighting, anything. I mean, it's just on and on, the list of people. And another thing I found in the last 2 summers is wells. Wells are going dry.
Right.
And if you're 70 years old, the chances that you're going to be able to haul water, and the fire stations cannot do it anymore, that I've been told.
And we know that drilling wells is very expensive, and these are all communities that don't have centralized water systems. Right. So you're really between a rock and a hard place.
And there's no real answer, except for don't pour your water in the well. I've learned that, because the groundwater level is the well, and you're just like pouring water. And the other, we're teaching everyone these skills to use the computer, to access, to go online, look at your Social Security, to look at what you need to know. But there is no internet. So if you can't know, the main roads, and I know Slick is working into the more rural areas, but especially in Parishville, you get away from the main drag, so to speak, there is none. And I have talked to Slick, and I've talked to other areas, and
so lack of broadband access is huge.
Fast enough internet that makes it so that they could order food. There are really, then there are places that will take SNAP benefits. So if you're shut in, you can actually receive food in the mail that is nutritious. And
there are, I know Amazon and several other online grocery stores are starting to do that. But again, if you can't order, then you can't get it. But but that's a way to overcome the transportation barrier if we fix the super information highway first. So.
And when we had talked, or in your notes you had mentioned, like, we are very property rich and we have a lot of taxes. So there's a lot of people with camps. And it just seems like they're coming from a place with a really good internet system or even self-service. And they're coming, if they could build on that, then maybe they would get more people willing to live here and
Right.
making their home here if they could come from somewhere that's not as challenged.
Right,
In these areas.
right. And that is really the problem with, it isn't just the North Country, it's all of rural America.
Yes.
There's so many rural places in New York State where those kinds of barriers and challenges exist. And I know the governor's just put more money into increasing the broadband services, but it's slow going to put a line down a road where two people live and you've got to go 10 miles before you get to where their house is.
Or
So
even to know
those people are at the kind of at the end of the priority list.
Right, and even to know that there's people there who would want it.
Right.
I mean, so, and that becomes I don't know.
So the housing stock, a lot of it's older, it hasn't been maintained for whatever reason, it needs a lot of rehab, and certainly the weatherization and insulation programs. One of the things, I was on a phone call this week, one of the proposals in the administration budget is to completely cut out the LIHEAP money, which is the money for heating help and cooling help, depending on where you live. Well, there are a lot of North Country families who depend on that to keep from freezing in the wintertime. So there's a lot of advocacy that we need to do from the North Country to make sure that these programs have the kind of support they need, because we have folks who aren't going to make it if we don't have these programs.
Literally, they will freeze.
Yes.
I mean, and the income level is like 15,000 or less. And to be looking at that and thinking that you can pay the rising cost of fuel, and then wood is as an alternative, and I know many people use it, but when you're getting up there in years,
There are physical limitations.
There are physical limitations, and I feel it's a danger, and that when they do these cuts, that they're just asking for a hazard, because people be using electrical heaters that may not have the wiring to support it.
That's right.
And then their bill will go so high, so then they don't have it's a vicious circle, and it does need a lot of
Yeah, it is. It is. So as we kind of wrap up here today, what would you like to leave with people who may be thinking about how they can help the Colton, Parishville, and Pierrepont Neighborhood Center? What is it that you could use from folks in terms of help or volunteers?
Volunteering is a big, and also knowing people in your area, in your neighborhood, who may need these services. We don't go knocking on doors, but if you have a woman or a man next door, family that are working and they just seem to be struggling, then make that call. Call. We're very, say we just. I've had people call and say, my neighbor cannot survive. We don't know. Is there any way you can reach out to them? And we do it confidential. And we aren't pushy. So I think that aspect and the volunteering to give somebody a ride. If you know an elderly person and you can do it, just say, hey, being a neighbor. And we're very fortunate out here. We do have really good neighbors.
And not everybody has family members left in the area who can help out, so sometimes you do need that helping hand from the next door neighbor or somebody in the community or the church community.
Yes, and then we have food drives. You can always use money.
Sure.
But there's, like if you see that the Winterfest is having this thing to benefit the neighborhood center, just go out there. But also I think it would be nice if people could visit and see what their community is putting forth, because some people have very negative images of neighborhood centers, and I think they would be pleasantly surprised to walk into any of the CDP neighborhood centers and see that they are places of hope and of moving on, and they're not like the end of the line soup kitchens from the Depression or something. It's just become involved, become knowledgeable, and become aware of what's going on.
And give your time and your talents.
Yes, your time and your talents also.
Well, Julie, thank you very much for coming in today. One of the things we know about life in the North Country is that it can sometimes be pretty hard, but on the other side of it, we have great folks who live here, and they're very generous and they're very caring. And so having neighborhood centers like yours where you can help to direct some of that energy is really an important community resource, so thank you. Our time is up. These conversations are a production of North Country Matters, produced here in the Public Library of Potsdam and the Fred W. Cleveland Computer Center. This shows a civic collaboration between the St. Lawrence County branch of the American Association of University Women, the St. Lawrence County League of Women Voters, and the Public Library in Potsdam. Please remember, our North Country matters. Julie, thank you. That was great.
Okay?
That was a good conversation.
Okay,
Thank you.
good. Thank you.
That was great.
And this